Hi, I'm Sharad Kuttan and welcome to Let's Talk, the show that tries to bring you the most important conversations of the day. Today we're going to be talking about our cities that need renewal, our cities that need help, and the vision that we have for our cities. Now, to help me with this conversation, I had Nolisa Hashim. She is the CEO of Urbanese, which is a center for sustainable cities and community well-being. I also have Lillian Tay. She's the Vice President of VERITAS Design Group, and Hamdan Abdul Majid, who is a Managing Director of Think City, a subsidiary of Khazanah Nasional Berhad. If I can bring you in on this at this point, you, I guess, in some ways represent the private side, the private enterprise, and as a stakeholder in these questions. How do you see it? I mean, what is your perspective on the question of urban renewal? Either writ large in terms of city planning or in terms of specific projects that you might be working on?
I'm a practicing architect. I've been working in KL for the last 28 years. In fact, KL is sort of my main area of practice. I'm also actually currently the Vice President of the Institute of Architects. So I'm also been engaged with sort of larger issues on urban planning and urban renewal. I also was born in KL and grew up in PJ and work here this last 28 years. And I've seen it go through an immense change in the last 20 plus years, especially since after the building of KLCC and the Petronas Towers. It really spearheaded a whole intense urbanization of KL. And renewal, of course, because KL's population has been also growing with a lot of urban in-migration. So it's a natural process, and it is the capital city. I mean, it is the financial and cultural capital of Malaysia. So it is obviously inevitable part of cities. And it is good that cities should grow, because cities are really the engines of growth, engines of wealth. I mean, that's where people accumulate. And cities need to reach a critical mass to be able to attract the best minds, the best businesses. So it's important to build a city, and of course it's constantly being renewed from what it was before. I mean, KL is now about 100 years old, 120 years old, I think.
We've in Kuala Lumpur have lost to Seremban, perhaps. It was a satellite city in many ways. Nilai is also, these are all competing, right? Lillian, how do you see? I mean, what Hamdan talked about earlier was also collaboration between the private sector and organizations like Think City that are trying to activate or reactivate parts of the city. How do private stakeholders think about it when they're faced with decline and decay in some urban centers?
Well, I think decline and decay it's not just a physical fabric. It's obviously a result of also social evolution. The small businesses and the family-run businesses that used to run businesses in these shop houses, let's say in Chinatown, in Masjid India. The kids have gone on to other businesses, so there's no one to continue the business. So it's not necessarily that there is like decline in terms of the social well-being of the people who are actually using the place, but the change.
They've moved up, perhaps even.
Yes, they have, and they're no longer. And also sometimes also the small business is not viable anymore because it's just they can't compete with the large supermarkets, hypermarkets, and so that's part of it. So if that social the social structure is not there to sustain it, obviously it will go to some of the use. It would be renewed, but it will be for new users. It could be changed to little hotels and boutique hotels, and other commercial use will naturally come in, and that's all part of the whole process of gentrification or renewal. That's the evolution of the city. And of course in KL the development pressure is very strong. There is a lot of it is also, could be redeveloped, and many people would seek to redevelop.
How do you see it? I mean,
land.
From a private owner's perspective, or the private sector, I mean, is zoning enabling, or is it a bureaucratic hindrance that becomes a nightmare for some of these property owners with their own ideas?
Well, I think the local authority would obviously have their structure plan and local plan that will set the overall framework for development of the city. And then, of course, that process, which Lisa would be very familiar with, would have had consultation, of course, with the communities who live there. But that doesn't necessarily mean consultation means that what's put in the plan is what they want, not always, right? Because everything has to be balanced in the larger interest generally across the whole city. Right to their property, you know? That's set out in the federal constitution, Article 13, your right to property and the right to the enjoyment of that property. And
Lillian, just because, you know, you're kind of like from the private sector in this panel, kind of. Tell us, I mean, what is it in the experience of actually really existing Malaysia and city planning, are city plans done in such a way that it actually has become more than not enabling for the private sector, for owners to create more value, but in innovative ways that preserve perhaps the social fabric as well?
Well, I think so. I mean, the overall local plan for KL, for instance, they set up city centres that are designated for development, you know, commercial, high-density mixed development, because you need that. You need to grow businesses in the city. You need to attract businesses. You know, cities need to achieve a certain critical mass before they actually are able to attract capital and investment. And so it is set up in there. So those people whose property are in the city centre, they would already know that the land is designated for commercial. If they had been a bungalow before, they know that it had, you know, it is designated for, could potentially be, you know, a high-rise building in there, and that's their right to it. So, and most people would want the land to be redeveloped. The most important part is really creation of jobs. You know, if you don't have jobs created in the city, no matter what you do, what master plan, you know, amazing master plan and investment put into it, the city will not thrive. If people don't have a reason to be in the city, i.e. they have, you know, if they have a job in the city, then they will want to live in the city. And that's key. So if there's no sort of a strong economic spine, you know, whether if it's a service-oriented city, and now services is, I think, 55% of our GDP. So services would naturally be housed in cities. So I think that's the most important part.
And how do you see this? You know, your clients, when they want to invest, you know, when they create a building, are they concerned about the immediate surroundings? Are they concerned about the wealth, the demographics, as it were? Because we have people living in gated communities in the Klang Valley who don't want to be associated with people from other classes. And we have, you know, really rich areas, right?
Well, I think the gated communities are not really in the city. It's too expensive for gated communities.
But I mean, part of the ecosystem of the Klang Valley, yeah.
Well, I think cities are generally a place for doing business. And then, of course, we all have known from illusionary cities that that's also an unsustainable city when the city doesn't have you know, resident population that gives it life, you know, after work hours. So a balance is important. I think I think KL has actually made a lot of progress. We've actually built up a very good, very high quality, you know, of world-class standards city centre. What it's missing is, I think, residential development has become too expensive for people to actually live in there and have a truly metropolitan lifestyle where you live and work in the city. I think that needs to be addressed, and I think there are a lot of hidden costs to making housing in the city that needs to be addressed, so that people actually do develop pure housing and not, like, you know, commercial development. And I think that will make a very much more balanced city. I think there is maybe a sort of a reaction, because we've gone through a period of intense growth where we've got all these super skyscrapers come in, you know, in areas which may not be most appropriate. For instance, as mentioned earlier, you know, in the middle of low-density historical district, and that has created a very anti-development sentiment, I must say, you know, in the population, which I think it needs to be really balanced out with, you know, the benefits really of development. It's inevitable, and it's good to develop to reach that critical mass where you will be a great metropolitan city like Singapore. You know, nobody complains about density in Singapore or about segregation. You know, I think there are lots of good residential pockets outside of the city. They are still very linked. We've got good public infrastructure. You know, to be honest, I think KL is actually doing very well.
What do you think, Lillian? Are you optimistic that we can bite the bullet on some of these major issues? You know, remove, you know, bad decisions, ugly edifices, and, you know, kind of renew our cities and those spaces that need renewal?
Well,
Are you pessimistic?
I think it would be good if we are able to undo, as Hamdan says, bad decisions in the past. There have been bad decisions, but usually we're all very polite, and we don't even call out a bad decision. There are many bad decisions actually being built right now as we speak, and that it will be hard to do.
But Professional Association of Architects, I mean, don't you call out bad decisions? Don't you point to ugly edifices and say, I mean, surely you are the gatekeepers of the beauty of the city. If not architects, then who? Or well, planners as well?
Yeah, thank you, Sharad. Thank you for reminding us. Indeed, I think that would be the duty of an institution to speak on behalf of the public. And I think we do to some extent, but obviously in Malaysia previously, I think in the new administration there's so much more space to speak, and I think it's an amazing opportunity for us right now to take this moment to redo, undo, things which had not done quite well, which we hadn't done well enough before. I think the infrastructure, I mean, the planning and all is there, but it got compromised along the way. But on the other hand, I think we should not underestimate what the achievements were in the past. They were. I think, the building of KL in the last 20 years is phenomenal. Whenever I go anywhere outside of Malaysia, people look at KL as a benchmark for city building. And people want to buy in KL because they are investing not just in a unit in KL, but they're investing in the urban infrastructure that have been put in place, our public transportation, whatever its initial flaws, but it's there, and the city is actually...
I note, just something for everybody to take note. All of you, thank you so much for joining me tonight. I've been speaking to Hamdan Abdul Majid from Think City, Lillian Tay from VERITAS Design, and Noliza Hashim from Urbanese. We've been talking about our cities. This is Let's Talk. I'm Sharad Kuttan, only on Astro One.